Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Van Hamert. This is Beltline to Broadway. It is Bastille Day. It's International Non-Binary Peoples Day, so I cannot think of a better way to celebrate those two things than with some of the cast and creatives behind the production of Marat Sade. Very exciting. Hi, guys.
Hello.
So I'm going to have you go around and introduce yourselves and tell me who you're playing in the role in the show. And then for those of you watching, if you have any questions or comments that you want to pipe in, I know some of the cast members are watching as well, because you guys are in rehearsal. Feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them. Dustin, I will start with you.
I'm Dustin Britt. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the director of Marat Sade.
I'm Riley Davis. I play the nurse. I get to stab people. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hello, I am Jessica Fleming, she, her pronouns. I'll be playing Cacole in the production as well as helping out with some music business.
Hello, I'm Germana. I am playing I'm playing Rue in the Schoolmaster. Yeah.
And I am very excited because this production is you're revisiting it from prior to COVID. You had staged it in the before times, and now it's coming back. And I'm so excited that it can. My description of this play is based on what I've read, because I have not seen this show yet, but based on what I've read, based on what you talk about, is mad people playing the part of revolutionary heroes in a play within a play. How would you describe it, Dustin?
That's it. How would I describe it? So my usual spiel is more about the context of the story than the content, because the context is much more interesting. Then you get in the room and find out, oh, this play is actually about stuff. But in the very early 19th century, the Marquis de Sade was actually allowed to stage small plays that he wrote in whatever asylum he happened to be in that day. He was in the Bastille before it fell, but then was moved to Charenton. And I guess partially to keep him busy and out of additional trouble, partially as art therapy, the religious leadership of Charenton allowed him to put on these plays. So this play imagines what might it have been like on one of those nights if you, the audience, were to come into that asylum and see that play. So when you come into this show, you're seeing inmates embody the characters of the French Revolution, and them being inmates. The play switches between patients and inmates, which is very telling. Considering how many difficulties and traumas these characters have, it doesn't go particularly well for anyone involved. And there's music. And
and there's music, although we should say it is not a musical, it is a play with music.
So
Correct.
Technically, but it has 16 songs in it, which is as many as Avenue Q. So it's our band would probably argue that it is a musical, considering how much.
This is lame as in the style of Avenue Q.
Jess is also our associate music director, so she plays a lot of music throughout the night.
And Al composed the pieces for the show?
Yes, they did. My beloved spouse, the Al Riggs, composed a new score for this production, and is also playing the piano and leading the band in the show as well.
I love it. Okay, so I want to talk about pre-COVID. This show opened days, and when I say days, like maybe 48 hours before the world shut down. And you played I was going to say there were like 2 performances, right?
Mhm.
2. So how
We sold
has
3 weekends worth of tickets.
so how has the show and Kim Jackson, who's with Beltline to Broadway, she actually reviewed the show. She really liked this show a lot. How has the work evolved? How has it been getting back together and reimagining and revisiting this piece post COVID?
That was a big question.
I guess for me, there's something that I felt artistically, not having any real life theater stuff. I was lucky, like a lot of folks, that I got to do some readings and kind of engaging over, the technologies over the last year and some change. But I think, at least for me, there's a added kind of urgency and necessity in doing this production now. I mean, the topics and the themes are universal and keep coming up.
Timeless, if you will.
Unfortunately, timeless kind of themes. So I'm really been investigating the kind of like urgency and like kind of bubbling that's been existing as a performer to getting to do this, and marrying that with the energy that I've been bringing to my character. I'm really excited to get to break this one out.
Germana, how about you?
Within the past year and a half, we're now under new presidency, but I think that the last year has really shaped this whole show in a bit. The way that it's a bit of a rebellion against the machine, and it's kind of like it's the same old song, but it's new. We're in a new time, and we are still facing the same issues. Especially when it comes to in relation to like Rue, or a lot of the characters like Sade and Marat, where you're just like, which side do I choose? Like, but do I choose a side? Am I really like, is either side for me? Like, so it's kind of, it could easily be 2021 in an asylum. We could easily be playing these characters just who we are. I could just be Germana, that could just be Jessica, that could just be Riley, and it could still resonate the same way. So I think that it'll be touching. It'll be more touching now to the audience, because they will actually sit and like think like, oh my God, like we really, not that we want to trigger any of that, but it is something that you would really sit back and look at and say, this is something that we are still going through. And I want the audience to leave with questions, about certain things, about where they are, political, religious. So yeah.
Well, and it really speaks to, the cliched Hamilton reference. If you don't stand for nothing, what do you stand for? So, and it makes you really think about the consequences, what's happening. There are so many layers, so many themes, so many things to tease out, Jessica, as you mentioned, that really speak to what we've seen happen in our world over the last year. So I want to kind of unpack those themes one by one and get your insight how this play reads now, post COVID, post George Floyd, post political uprising. So let's start with classism. What does this play say? We're diving deep. Welcome to Beltline on Stage.
We actually staged. You want to talk about what we staged last night? The bit we added with you and Simon.
Yeah. So we have added this moment. There's yeah, there's so much discussion in this play about you have these people with these money and the status that they refuse to give up, and then you have all of the people underneath them who are breaking their backs and killing each other for breadcrumbs. You worked in this moment of, Simon Kaplan, who's playing Sade, as this, these aristocratic people who, just it is out of their like showy greatness, goodness of their heart that they would even, if they were to give to the poor, they make a big show of it, but all of it is just a slap in the face, and it all amounts to this. It amounts to this, kick in the face of this person who's, myself representing this kind of beggar on the street who is, you have these two elements of this, like people who have everything and people who have nothing, and there's no in between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think with a lot of the conversations I've been having with folks on this platform, I don't think, classism and racism, they go hand in hand. And so I don't think we can address the racism issue if we don't start talking about classism. So I'm happy to unpack this with you guys. What do you think, Riley?
I think they usually do go hand in hand. And when you look at the way classism affects people globally, it presents itself differently. But here we have this really strange thing where it's like these people were enslaved for hundreds of years, and now what do we do with all of these humans, which is kind of how I think it's strange. But I think COVID has really forced everybody to deal with how they think about oppression, because whether you think wearing masks is oppressive, whether you think a curfew or police brutality or really anything that's been going on is oppressive, you're forced to confront those feelings. And social media gives you that distance too of I can say whatever I want. So I think this show is
anonymously in some cases, which is
right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think this show is timelier than ever. I mean, you have billionaires fighting over who gets to claim space. Meanwhile, there are people starving around the world. Like it doesn't make any sense.
And there's to kind of that point too, there's the, at least in this country, which is a little bit different from, this perspective of the French Revolution, that your proximity to wealth and your proximity to privilege and education is also your proximity to whiteness. And that's in that kind of, how this still, if you were living in we're trying to live the American dream, it's like you're trying to fulfill this 1950s, 1970s America, and it doesn't look like brown people, and it doesn't look like immigrants, and it doesn't look like, LGBTQ people. And it's the lie that everyone's living. And honestly, it's not going great for most white folks either.
Germana, you've sat on a torn panel. You and I have done an interview before. What do you think about this notion of classism as it pertains to Marat Sade? And I shouldn't say notion, theme.
As it pertains to Marat Sade, okay, so as it pertains to Marat Sade, I can see a bit of Malcolm and Martin as far as the classism in it, if you want to say that. And I'm only speaking of the classism because Martin and Malcolm are Black and their followers were Black and they were all for the Black people, but they went about it in a different way. I'm speaking from a personal experience that more so people who followed Martin were of a certain class, and more so the people who followed Malcolm were of a certain class, all Black, but they were either lower class people or middle class. There was no in between, because when you fast forward it to now, or you could still say back then, we had successful Black people. It didn't matter how classy, or it didn't matter your classism, you were still Black. True. It didn't matter how much money you had, right? And it still doesn't matter. I've seen Black police officers being oppressed. I've seen well-off Black people, doctors, lawyers, whatever, engineers being oppressed, and they are of the higher class. but they're Black. So as it pertains to Marat and Sade, I can see where there may be a certain class who want better living arrangements. They don't want to pay all these taxes, and they want to steal from the rich to give to the poor. And then I can see people in a certain higher class who are like, no, you can't sit with us. This is our circle. Like, you have to work hard, pull yourself up by your shoe straps or by your hair or whatever to get here. And if you didn't do that, then oh well, sorry for you. Like, we did that. But as it pertains to racism, as it pertains to race, and as it pertains to Black people, I've seen it in white people where, a certain class, you're white, but you're in a certain tax bracket, so that's fine, you can do this. Or you're white, but you're below my tax bracket, so I'm not really going to be for you, but okay. But if you're Black, you don't have that option. You're Black, so you can't come in through the front or the back door. So I can see it in as far as Marat and Sade goes, I can see that. But as far as it goes in reality, we don't have that option as Black people. Classism and racism, in a nutshell, maybe it should be separate. Maybe it shouldn't be, two things hurled together in this big, but it's not. Because when it comes to Black people, I don't care how much money you got, you still Black. So, I don't know if I can say this on your show, Lauren. Jesus.
Go for it, Germana.
Germana.
Lauren, you know where I'm going.
You've been here before,
When Kanye said, like, you still a nigga in a coupe, that's true. You can afford the coupe. I can afford 1,000 of them, and I can probably afford them. Like, I can afford 1,000 coupes and then see the white person next to me who's in a Honda, 93 Honda. But I'm still a nigga. Like, I'm still going to be the one who gets oppressed. I'm still going to be the one who's asked, is this your car? I'm still going to be the one who gets, torn down. And I could buy the police station if I wanted to, So it's kind of, the class goes right out of the door. When it comes, come on, like, I could buy this whole thing. Like, I could pay my way for this case to go away, but I probably won't even live to get to the court case. So as far as the reality, that classism and racism thing does not exist for Black people. As far as Marat and Sade, I can see where they're coming from, because honestly, they're on the same plane. Everybody's locked up. Everybody in the asylum. Like, there's nobody that I could turn next to and be like, oh, you're not a prisoner. You're actually, no, we're all in here for the same thing. We're all in here for the same thing. So, as it pertains to Marat and Sade, yes, there is a classism and probably a racism thing, but as it pertains to reality, no. Black people don't have that option. So yeah, that's my spill on it. And I'm sorry if I offended. That is why
I'm glad you are here. You don't offend. You're truth telling, and that's what I love about you. So, I also want to kind of just talk on the surface level. It does take place in an asylum. There's been a lot of discussion about mental health issues when we talk about mental health services, when we talk about any type of healthcare. Again, marginalized communities are the ones who really get the short end of the stick. So how does this read? And Dustin, I'll ask you this. How does this play read post-COVID when we've all experienced this isolation and many of us have suffered from mental health, anxieties, depression, whatever. As I always tell my daughter, we all have a little something. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So what do you think, Dustin?
A lot of the characters in this play are, you could write textbooks about their something something. In the original text of the play, which is written in 1963, so it has some very different ideas of mental. Even in 1963, some of the stuff in this play is like, they thought what? But in the text, the characters are all given pretty detailed descriptions of whatever their mental illness is. The inmate, for most of the characters, it's an inmate embodying a historical figure. We don't know that Rue is actually the fallen priest. He might be, but it might also be an inmate who thinks that they are Jacques Rue. What I love about Jemana's performance is we're never quite sure, is this Rue or is this someone who thinks they're Rue? And she walks this beautiful line. Riley is one of the unique characters in that she's a nurse, not an inmate. But you see her character providing care to these patients and trying not to be a prison warden, but trying to be a healthcare worker. And when we first presented it over a year ago, I think we came into it thinking she was going to be a little bit more on the bad side and she was going to be a bit more of a prisoner. But particularly in this newer production, I think we've been trying to make connections between the nurse and some of the patients in a more empathetic way that lets us side with her. We've been doing that with several characters, is finding ways that we can be more empathetic with them. The play on the page wants us to be afraid of these characters and feel that they're hostile and there's a sense of danger, because that's exciting. Well, it's exciting for 20 minutes. Then what do you do with that? So we're trying to find ways to make them sympathetic, because the key is if we want people to have access to care, we have to view them as humans.
That's what I was about to say, yeah.
Not as customers, not as subjects, but as humans. So one thing we've been playing with for the past couple of weeks is we've been trying to find ways to more humanize the characters and not look so much at the big idea, but start to look at them as individuals, which I don't think I, as a director, had taken the time to do as much the first time. But I think now that we have the luxury of everyone knows the show's blocked, they know these characters better than anyone else in the world. Now what can we look at? As far as mental health goes, I no longer think that's what this play is about really at all. I think the framework of an asylum is just a frame that we can play within. It could easily be a prison. It could easily it is a prison, but it could easily be officially a prison, not even faking itself as a treatment center. The fact is that the characters are living in a prison type environment. The fact that they're not receiving mental health treatment is no different from people who are in prison now who are not receiving adequate health care. People are dying in prison very needlessly.
Living in holes.
Living in holes, dying in holes, holes in our bellies and holes in our clothes is the line from the show. Jess might be able to tell you more about how her characters are working their way around their illness, but I think the play isn't so much anymore about a statement about mental illness or healthcare. I think that's more just the box we're playing in. I think it adds a lot of depth to it because these are traumatized characters, and so many mental health services that are necessary that aren't provided are surrounding trauma and people who need treatment and recovery from trauma. These are characters who are actively being traumatized as well as have experienced trauma. No character in this play is healing from past trauma. We're watching the trauma happen in real time, which is what makes this play so different. Is they're not patients being healed. They're being put through torture. And what makes it unique is that you have the people who are being put through trauma asked in the moment, what's it like to be experiencing trauma? And you actually step back and give them the floor. And it's quite a 2.5 hours for people who are living the trauma to describe it to you and tell you how they feel about it and how it makes them feel politically. How are things in terms of feeling out your character's psychology?
Yeah, I've been so I like a few people in the cast are kind of taking on a few different roles. And an idea that I've been playing with a lot is this overlap of kind of oppression in healthcare a little bit. Of traditionally, women have always been thought of incapable of understanding their bodies and their brains and what's happening to them, and people who are neurodivergent or have different cognitive functions are viewed as incapable of taking care of themselves, and are often the responsibility of somebody, and we don't give them proper care, support. Yeah, they have no agency. So I've been really playing with the idea of at least one of my characters isn't so much that there's anything wrong with them, it's that because they do not fit into the societal obligations, they have suddenly been deemed a problem and they need to be fixed.
Yeah.
When ultimately, just because you don't fit into the traditional role that you are expected to, you have become deemed a problem and incapable of, taking care of yourself. And I think especially this, time of in this last couple months, we've had a lot of, I think, is it like Disability Awareness Month currently? And the fact that, the Disabled Americans Act, I forget what it's called, has only been around for maybe 30 years.
Yeah, the ADA.
And still does not give people with who are labeled disability any sort of take care of themselves. Like if you have more than $2,000, you lose your medical benefits. And it's like, I think everybody after COVID knows $2,000 ain't nothing.
Ain't shit.
And that's gone like
It
that.
ain't shit.
And you have, and especially historically in this country and lots of other countries, I'm speaking specifically of the view of women who, if you didn't want to have children or you knew anything about women's bodies, you were deemed a witch or were involved with the devil or had some sort of mystical understanding and you weren't to be trusted. And that's the whole, that's all around midwifery for the last, how many ever hundreds of years. It's like you have to be in cahoots with the devil to understand how babies come out.
To be fair.
But I'm very interested in playing with the idea of pushing back against this idea that people don't know how to take care of themselves. And that somebody in this father knows best, mother knows best role is speaking for many of these people in this institution who do need care and do need help. Shoving them in a room and saying we're doing good work isn't helping anyone.
I think if I can go off of you for a second, that's why I really love The Nurse. The first time we did this show, I am not gonna lie to you, the first time Dustin showed me this, I was like, all right, I get to watch a play.
She's just chilling.
I'm just in the, but then just really getting into it, I think the audience kind of looks through her eyes in certain moments. And I think what I've really been trying to work on as an actor and developing the character is how does she feel about these people? Do they remind her of somebody? Is there something in her past that makes her relate to them? Different kind of backgroundy pieces that I need to know to inform decisions. Because I don't think she comes at it from the same headspace as the Herald or the Coulier or et cetera, because she genuinely cares about these people and wants to help them. She doesn't want to hurt themselves or them to hurt anyone else. She's literally just there for the safety because she cares about these people.
Well, the nurse actually interacts with patients where administration and people who are making those decisions rarely ever would.
Right, exactly. She cares about who these people are. She, wants to affect change and help them better themselves as best she can. And I think, like you were saying, it humanizes everybody in the space, because I feel like sometimes this show, it's very easy to get lost in the philosophy headspace of it, of, two old guys arguing, you know what I mean? But then you kind of bring that emotion back into it. And I think that's what makes the show really powerful.
Okay, so going back to my list, Jessica, you touched on the next theme that I want to unpack. So, and we're going to talk about gender identity. That's a separate thing that I want to discuss. But let's talk about gender equality. Over the pandemic, we celebrated the centennial of some women getting the right to vote and the women's suffrage movement. So what does this play have to say about gender equality, more so than what you've already talked about, Jessica, about the fact that women can take care of themselves?
I mean, this has been a thing. I could say, I mean, like probably most women who have had any experience in dealing specifically with like medical healthcare related things over the last however many little bits, you know, I mean, I've had doctors not take me seriously when I express things about pain or anxiety and, you know, things that have been able to slide in medical journals that are accredited that are like just completely barbaric, that, you know, Black people feel pain differently than white people was an understood belief until I think it was finally pulled out of medical journals in the early 90s. And, you know, the fact that how many, kind of like I said earlier, that, you know, you could put your wife away for years and years and years if she was depressed, if she was anxious, if she was blue for too long. When, you know, don't allow women to express themselves, be creativity, have any agency, what do you expect a person is going to do when you essentially have them in what is a socially acceptable, you know, sensory deprivation chamber? You can't think for yourself. You don't have freedoms. You don't have bodily autonomy. If you are essentially just, you know, the accessory of your husband, and if you derivate any bit from that, you are problematic or troublesome. It's like, that is a burden that people have to break out of, and some people don't because it's a big fucking ordeal. You're correct.
Kind of. I want to talk about gender identity, and Dustin, you posted on your Facebook page, this production puts queer rage on stage, and that's why it's the right show for right now. This past year has been catastrophic for the trans community. LGBTQIA rights have been attacked. Is the gender identity piece of this, is that something you're bringing as an additional layer to this production, or is that something that's actually outlined in the text?
So, kind of and no. When I cast this, I made a very conscious decision to cast as few cisgender men as I could get away with. We have plenty of roles on stage. There's plenty for us to do. We're good. We don't need to be in everything. And because this play mostly prescribes inmates playing characters, it describes the historical figure, it doesn't describe the inmates. So there's nothing to say then that we can't change the age or the gender or the race or the ability level of any of these characters, because who's to say that the inmate playing the 50-year-old dying man can't be a 10-year-old girl, just for example. You can do whatever you want with it. So I wanted to make, so at this point in the cast, I think there's 11 of y'all. There's 2 men in the cast, and everyone else is either non-binary or woman throughout the cast. What's really fascinating and cool and exciting and impressive is that when we performed the play the first time, I had fewer non-binary people in the cast, because between then and now, 3 cast members are now identifying openly as non-binary who weren't before. So I've joked the cast is getting queer by the minute. I can't even stop it. I'm Sade. It's just permeating throughout the cast. It's just I'm getting a little queer just for being in the room. So that's been interesting. So in changing the genders of the characters, it already is presenting actors with opportunities for, am I playing this character as a male? Am I playing this character as someone without gender? Am I playing this character as female playing male? Because like Germana's character is written as a male, but it doesn't say who the patient is. So there's there's a tremendous amount of freedom to play within that world. And I've tried to give the actors a lot of autonomy in how they want the gender of their character to be expressed. And whether that matches their own gender expression is up to them. I don't want to speak for any of my queer cast members about what their experiences might be, but my intention is definitely to open that playing field and let the actors explore these characters' gender identities in whatever ways they're comfortable with. But a lot of the queerness of the show has come from the queerness of the cast, not the queerness of the text. And that's just, I just got blessed with a bunch of cool queer people in my play. If you have a good, strong cast who bring themselves to the piece will start to reflect the times, and it will start to reflect the cast. Pieces of them will get in there. And the more that this cast has been willing to open up, and they've trusted each other, they've trusted me, they've trusted the text, it takes a lot of vulnerability to do this play. And they've all shown such vulnerability that they've come into it, and it's brought more life to it. We have one character. The character is named Simone. It's played by an inmate. And Rachel Potter Nunn plays the character. And early on, this was going back to people not listening to women about their bodies, and even worse at that time. Rachel made this really incredible decision. She said, what if this character has lost a child and is processing that trauma in the asylum? How do we convey that? And she said, well, what if I think I have a child with me, but I don't? So one day Rachel just showed up at rehearsal with a football in swaddling clothes. And I said, okay, that's an idea. Let's play with that. And that just came from Rachel examining what about being a woman could be unique for this character. And so now this character acts and behaves throughout the play as though she has a living child with her. And what's interesting is that the other actors have made the choice that their characters behave as though the baby is real as well, to help that character live in the space that she needs to live in to deal with her own trauma. The cast just seemed to uniformly, non-verbally decide this baby is real as far as we're concerned. And that was fascinating. That did not come out of me. That was something that the group kind of formulated. And I thought that was a really great moment.
I think, if I may, I think posing her as a mother makes Mad Animal hit just a little bit differently.
You want to describe more about what you're talking about?
Okay. Yeah. So there is a scene where Simone goes off about man's a mad animal. In my time, I've committed over 1 million murders, and we are standing on the what's the word I'm looking for? Decomposed. The decomposed corpses of the ones who came before us, and that the greatest danger to man is himself.
It's very violent and visceral.
Yes, very. And the way her physicality is beautiful as well. But I think the fact that just the way she plays the scene, and as a mother, having that thought process, I think is really interesting, because she has brought life into the world and can realize and recognize that perhaps that wasn't the best decision, because this is man's a mad animal. This is going to be the ultimate destiny, I guess. And she wouldn't have noticed that if you didn't encourage her to lean into whatever traits she wanted to lean into.
And that speech doesn't even belong to that character. That speech just belongs to a random patient. And just because I didn't want to cast 28 people, so what if I take all these patients and assign them? And when I cast it, I said, I have a very passionate, fiery actress who's playing this role as though she's 10 feet tall when she's far from that. I said, what if she had the most violent, batshit speech in the whole play, was not given to some big brutish monster, but what if someone had this brutish monster trapped in because of what they've been through? They needed to push it out, and giving it to her, and she just took it, and I went, best decision I ever made was to let her do what she wanted to do.
When we talk about trauma, I mean, this has been such a traumatic year for so many people. Now you're returning to the stage in a play all about trauma. So how do you keep yourselves safe? And I guess I'm not talking about physically safe. I guess that's a piece of it, but really emotionally safe. How do you emotionally disconnect from the trauma that's happening? Because it really sounds like you're all very invested in these characters.
Looking at it from big picture, and I'm gonna let them talk about it, but just to look at it from a big picture, I've tried really hard to be. I've always tried hard to be cognizant of the psychological needs of the actors, particularly in a play like this that is so demanding and can be so triggering to a performer. But especially coming back, basically, a lot of us are really struggling emotionally, as much as up to and including right now. That sometimes people are needing to take the night off to just be outside of this play. So there are nights when someone will say, "Hey, it's a rough day. I don't really need to live with this character tonight. Could I maybe work on this at home?" And of course, because it's scary shit. So I think part of it is that we've built a community as a cast and a crew that we're very supportive of one another, and we're very empathetic, and we understand each other's needs. And there's a huge lack of judgment that I'm hoping that we've got as a group. And I think that's helpful because a lot of us are struggling. This is by no means easy. This is a hard play to deal with when you're doing okay.
Yeah.
In the best of times. I mean,
Right.
it's a hard play in the best of times. So
Not in the worst of times.
What's it like for y'all as like having to play characters that are quote unquote insane or having meltdowns?
Ramona, you want to?
I think that playing Rue, I don't know, playing a character that is traumatic is a traumatic thing. I've played characters that were traumatic, and I had to be there, and I had to be in that moment, and that's hard to get rid of. You take it with you for a very long time. There's roles that I still have with me that I performed before, that I performed years ago, and I am still mentally, there's like a dash. You know how prisoners say, "I marked the day on the wall." Like those are marks on my soul, on my mental. You don't really, I'm speaking for myself. I can't say all actors, but you don't really shed. You don't really shed none of that. Especially someone who like me, where I love to perform, I love to entertain, and I love to take on characters like Rue. I don't like to take on characters so dramatic, like the character I played was Eddie McCoy, where it was like a civil rights thing, and that was, I don't like to really take on characters like that anymore. That stuff really does a number on you. But when you go into roles like that, or roles like Rue, and sometimes being insane is a release. But when you are actually sitting with your character, and you're getting to know your character day and night, all day, every day, and you're like, me and this character are now best friends, and I know everything about this character knows everything about me. It's sad because you're getting to know that character. Rue is sad. He is a religious rebel. A lot of people don't understand, just as a whole, how much we contribute to the crazy. and it's sad because he's trying to say something. He's trying to get people to listen, which every character is. Like, everyone in this asylum is just trying to get somebody to listen, trying to get somebody to just shut up, listen. Like, I know that I'm clinically, it says I'm crazy, but I'm really not crazy. Like, I'm really just I'm really trying to tell you something. I'm really just trying to get you to listen. And if you listen instead of laughing, maybe we can get somewhere. And that's a real thing. And then dealing with that as Germana, someone who is dealing with mental instability, it's very hard. It's difficult. It's difficult to put into words, and I wish there was a word stronger than difficult that could better explain it. But it's a fire that just will not go out, and you might get it down to an ember. You might get it down to a little candle lit type of fire, but it's still there. And it comes, and you don't ever know when it's going to come. And then when you have characters like this, it's kind of like, okay, what is my character? What is Rue going to say to trigger Germana? So you don't really, like I said, I'm speaking for myself. You don't really escape. I can't really escape from it. All I can do is try to sit in it, understand it, learn more about it. And within that, I learn more about myself. What are my stopping points? What am I comfortable with? Speaking, talking to people, and not being being unapologetic about it. Not being not having a fear that I would lose something, and not really. I'm always like, I don't want this to be a crutch. I don't want people to see me as unable, because I'm not unable. So, yeah.
One thing that,
I don't think anybody, Germana, who has talked to you for 5 minutes would say you're unable for anything.
one of our two title characters, the Marquis de Sade, played by Sir Simon
Sir in our hearts.
Lord Simon Kaplan. Playing the Marquis de Sade is a despicable figure, but deliciously despicable in the way that, like, you can't look away from Hannibal Lecter. He's a monster, but it's like, I want to hang out with him and talk to him.
Bonnie and Clyde.
But Simon said to say the things that the Marquis de Sade has to say in this play, sometimes the Marquis de Sade says things just for the purpose of being vulgar and shocking. Sometimes he says things to traumatize people in real time to their face. He's what we might call sadistic.
Someone had to do it.
Not a dad joke.
When we closed last March during COVID, we were hoping we would be back by April, May, June, July. And it finally got to June, and Simon said, Dustin, are we stopping, or are we staying together right now? And I said, I think it could be a year. He said, great, I need to know, because I have got to get away from this guy for a while, from the character. Because he's running his lines every night, he's working on it, and they're all doing this. They're working on it. And to have hung on to these characters for a year and a half, damn it, it's a lot. So I remember Simon going, I have to go home and forget about this play and forget about all these lines. You call me when you're ready to put it back together, and I'm totally excited to jump in. But this guy's grossing me out. This guy's creeping me out. And it's like Germana said, living with this person, it's a lot, especially when they're a real person that lived, and we have the stuff he said. He's a monster. There's something devilishly entertaining about the way Simon plays it, but that doesn't mean it's pleasant to do and say the stuff that he's doing.
we talked about trauma for the cast and the actors and the emotional care for you all. Let's talk about the audience for a second. We've been, all of us have been traumatized by our politics, by the pandemic, by the police, by the images we've seen on television. Now we're going to sit in this play, and there are for sure going to be some boring things. So, aside from writing a disclaimer on every single aspect of the play,
Which I've
or
done
some
on the
sort of
ticketing website.
warning, how do you care for the audience as actors and as a director?
If I may.
Yeah. Please.
I think the biggest thing is transparency. The more you can let an audience know what they can expect, the more they will be prepared to engage with whatever material you're presenting. If somebody told me I was going to see Bye Bye Birdie and I showed up for this play, I would be upset and confused and not, not
Dick Van Dyke was terrible.
Right, and not ready for what's going on. And I think that does a disservice to the audience to not be as open as possible. One thing that I have really enjoyed about this process is that we always make sure to check in and out. And for me, I think that helps us to create a barrier between Jessica the person and Coco the role, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? You were talking about Simon, like Simon the person, great dude, let's hang out, but Dasad, no thanks, So I think things like this, as much press and publicity and things like that we can do to let the audience get to know us, we are real people, and that it's not, these are characters we're playing, you know what I'm saying? They don't have any bearing on who we are really or how we necessarily really think. So people are being presented with a message, but they don't have to accept it if they don't want to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And no one's coming to this show who doesn't know what they're getting into. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue.
So all of that. And on our ticketing website, I have a list of, broadly speaking, potential things. There's a lot of discussions of violence. The show does not have an enormous amount of violence performed on the stage, but it is discussed in enormous detail. And I think sometimes with content warnings, people forget the discussions about things can be just as traumatizing as representations of things.
True.
There is a lot of discussions about sexual assault in the play, though there isn't actually sexual assault performed in the play, because I cut it. When it comes to caring for the audience, first of all, it's not the actor's responsibility to care for the audience. That's on me.
Say it again.
And Jamal and I were talking the other day about a certain choice. Will this offend people? We're like, so? It's going to offend some people, yes. Is our goal to offend people? Some people might need to be offended.
Ooh.
Some people may be a little comfortable. And sometimes you need to be taken out of your comfort zone. That does not mean you go out of your way to be offensive or shocking for the sake of being like, ooh, our play is super scandalous. When this play came out in the 60s, it was like, ooh, this play is so scandalous and so violent and so sexual. We gotta go see it. I don't want there to be why people come to this play. There are sexual assaults in the stage direction that we're not doing. And I made that decision because I don't want to watch it.
No.
I don't want to make any actress or actor do it. I don't want to have us live in that show after show after show after show. I don't want the audience to have to live through it. Partially because this is not on a proscenium stage. This is in the round. Mm-hmm. Welcome. So the things that I'm staging, I have to be very careful because we are just a foot away from the audience. So I have to be very conscious of that when I stage it. It's one thing when we're 50 feet away and they're up there and I can distance myself emotionally. We're right here with them. So this might be perceived as a fairly tame version of the way this can sometimes be staged because you're right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to exercise a lot of control. Audiences sometimes need to be offended. I'm particularly okay if white people get offended, and I'm particularly okay if straight people get offended, because it's not a problem.
Yes.
No, my monkey's not my circus.
Not my. This is my circus, but yeah. But I think, and Heather Strickland is our intimacy choreographer, and Riley mentioned checking in and checking out. From the very beginning, Heather set up a really great vocabulary for us and a process for us as far as checking in and out with characters and each other. But as Jamana pointed out, that can't protect an actor from their character. That can help an actor separate themselves from another actor and another actor's character in a way that can really help do a lot of the work. But when actors go home, acting is difficult. It can be very complicated. And I applaud the bravery of the people who have not only did this play, but hung around for a year and a half to jump back into it. As far as audience safety goes, I realized that not only are the sexual assaults in this play gratuitous, they don't actually help tell the story. The audience is not stupid. They do not need to see everything in order to receive information.
Yeah.
How on the nose have you got to be? I don't like plays that don't let me participate actively in the problem solving process. I love to be presented as an audience member. I like to be presented with information and be allowed to participate in putting those things together to come to some conclusions. And I'm okay if those pieces don't all quite line up in the end. Maybe I'll go home and be able to play with that. So all the audience needs to know is that this character can potentially sexually assault this character. They just need to know that it's happened and that it's probable and that the group is afraid of it. As long as they know that, they can imagine where it could go from there. So if you can instill the fear of it, because the fear is the intention, the being afraid of this person is the intention. Watching them do horrible things isn't the point. So if there's a character who sexually assaults people, all I need to do is show that character attempt it once, be stopped by a nurse, and we spend the rest of the play afraid that he might do it again.
Yes. And to add on to that, we are classy. No, I'm very classy, okay? I'm from old school theater, okay? But being able to read as a director, that's why Dustin is awesome. Being able to read that and stage it and tell the story without giving you everything, because I'm grown. Like I know what's okay. So we know why he in here. We know he got a little problem. All right. We don't need to see the problem. We just know he has that problem. We know what that issue is. Okay. And like Dustin said, this is the way it's staged when you have things that are in the round, or when you have things that are on a grand stage. It's different. It's totally different. I just lost my thought process. And also being able to not only, like, as far as your question goes, Lauren, I mean, I'm not trying to be insensitive, but I don't care about the audience. I don't. That's not because I can't act if I'm caring about, let me not say that word. So, like, I can't act. So it's not my job to care. You can leave. But at the same time, it's like Dustin has put things in place. And a lot of theaters put things in place where they know, where the audience member knows ahead of time, this is what you're getting yourself into. And I think that that's awesome. What Dustin was saying, we had that conversation earlier about, what if Rue says this? We don't care. Maybe some people do need to be a little offended. Maybe some people need to shake and squirm a little bit. And I think that just this whole, the way that we're going about it is classy and very. It's still going to leave you on the edge of your seat and thinking about what you just saw. And I think it's going to be a conversation even after the show is done. That's the most important thing. So, yeah.
We've made a slight adjustment to how the ending of the play is portrayed. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get into spoilers, but the conversation that Jermon and I had was, what if this very big, important, impactful moment was between a Black character and a white character instead of two white characters? What might that change about the meaning of the whole play? And we were like, okay, there's something there. Mm-hmm. There's something there that we don't have to say.
Yeah. Right.
But maybe there are connections and lessons that can be, it's not an answer, it's a question.
Right.
And that's what we had to figure out. And basically like, we'll piss off the right people. Basically, when we came to that conclusion.
And we don't do things for shock value. That's tasteless. We do things to make you think, and we do things to trigger something. Sometimes your mind, I always think of the brain or the mind that has different compartments. And sometimes you lock away different compartments, like unintentionally on purpose. But we're trying to unlock something that is in the person's mind and helps them grow or at least ask questions. So I think with this character Rue, we will definitely do that. And I think the whole asylum as a whole will do that for the audience members. So,
but also, and as far as protecting the audience, when this play is over, there are a series of emotions that could come from the audience, but we're trying very hard to make the end of the play feel as cathartic as possible. So the audience doesn't walk away feeling grungy and grimy and want to take a shower, but that there is a sense of empowerment that I'm trying to give the characters that I think the text doesn't. So we're also being very conscious of tone, because this play has 93 tones and several keys as well. Turns out. But we're also trying to make sure that the audience can have an experience that is meaningful, impactful, but ultimately it has to be entertaining in order for them to stay with us.
And I think to some of that too, kind of like Jermon said earlier, I'm an entertainer. I love to make people laugh. I love to be silly. I love to bring people together and tell a story.
You clown most of the show.
I just act like a fool like the whole way through. And I think there's room in theater now to just be candy, to just be the song and dance and the feel good and the like, I just want to escape to the magical land of golden age musicals for however long. And that's a beautiful thing. There's also room for a safe sandbox for you to come and spend a couple hours to take care of yourself. And I tell people, like, I've left shows because there was stuff that made me too upset. I told my friends, I'm like, I can't watch a play about Alzheimer's anymore because I've had too many people, like, I have to tap it because or else it's gonna be me ugly crying for an hour and a half. So we've made a sandbox. We've laid the rules. If you want to come play and think and live in that space with us, please come. Please be open-minded. Please share that space. If you need to take care of yourself or you don't want to sit with those feelings, maybe not right now for you. And maybe down the line. But if you want to come in, we've set the rules. You can check in, you can check out, and we're happy to have you and share this conversation with people.
I'm surprised how funny the show's turned out to be.
Only to the credit of the cast.
The show has gotten, there are also many cases in which, because this cast are so inherently comedic in the way that the group I've got together, it's like, oh, these are all musical theater improv nerds in this tormenting show. It's also trying to find levity where we can and let it become goofs. But there's a lot of levity in the show. A lot of the music is silly and joyful, but then switches into very scary and ominous. And There are comedy bits, there are magic shows, there's clowning, there's all kinds of wonderful, glorious stuff. And then, boom, on the other end. So it kind of flows all around. There's a lot.
It is all the things.
It is all the feels. And I feel like also just finishing up this audience piece, the audiences, as we venture back into the world of live theater, has to be engaged and active and know what they're getting into. You can't just blindly. So no more bye-bye birdie posters for you, Dustin. Put out the real posters. No, I'm just kidding.
And when we did the design, Katie Judge, who's our production designer, as well as one of the actors, did this incredible poster, which I said, I want the poster to capture the tone, so the audience can look at the poster and know, okay, I kind of know what this is, so that it's not misleading. And I love what she did with it, because that's been really helpful. Also, as far as other safety is concerned, we are seating audiences at half capacity. We have a social distancing plan for where to seat audiences. Audiences are required to wear masks in the theater. The actors are not going to be masked, but we're following very intensive protocols for protecting our cast and to protect the audience. Surprisingly, it's been much easier to protect them from COVID than protect them from being upset.
I want to quote a passage from the play because it's so telling to me. I never believed the pen alone could destroy institutions. We're all skipping a few things. We're all clogged with dead ideas passed from generation to generation. That even the best of us don't know the way out. Can we talk about one of the things the play explores is this relationship between art and its ability to affect change? Does theater have a role in affecting change and how we view our present?
If I may.
Go for it.
I think it has to. If it doesn't, I mean, like you said, there are some things that are, the bubblegum pop, the hairsprays, the bye-bye birdies of the world, and those are fine. But there has to be a space for affecting change because art imitates life and life imitates art. It's not something you can really get away from. People are writing these stories. People are acting out these stories. People have lived these stories. So I think it has to be capable of instilling emotion in people and calling people to action. And you've seen that culturally happen time and time again. So I think it's something that it inspires a lot of people to do theater specifically for that reason. Because there's something about, the monologue and the solo light that can just grab your heart, and the same thing with music or dance or really any form of artistic expression. I think humans are just geared towards that because there are some things you can't say without words, or maybe you don't have the words, So I think it has to be a space for change, and there has to be room for it to be a space to change in order for it to function the way it should, the way it needs to.
I don't think every theater piece has to be a call to action. I think you just have to tell the truth.
Yes.
And I tell you the truth, and you do what you want to with that information. You can forget about it. You can let it make you happy, angry, sad. You can make decisions based on it. You can forget about it. Our job is to show you some element of the truth in a stylized fashion. And then you do what you want with that information. The last thing I want to do is be preachy.
Yeah.
Because people don't react well to that.
Mm-hmm. And I think something that especially something that I've felt a lot, especially in the last year, is it's very easy to go to a play about politics and about race and be fired up and be like, yes, I agree with these ideas. And it's really easy to share a great image on Instagram or on Facebook. And I think I want people to keep making art that is important to them, important to the communities they exist in. But I need the people who are going to see that play to not just be like, man, look how progressive I am. I can see him playing with, colorblind casting and queer people in roles traditionally with straight people. It's like, okay, what you gonna do about it? What is your takeaway besides coming to the theater, going to the art retrospective, being seen? It's one thing to be seen in these things. It's another thing to how are you going to it's more than just like we love asses and seats in theaters. But I also want people to, if you're gonna participate. Don't just come because it's the buzz. If you want to support these communities and you want to support these artists and musicians, you have to embody it fully. If you want, I mean, I am getting frustrated in the world that we keep getting these reboots of musicals and TV shows and movies. And I can't help but think of how many people have stories about anything
that aren't being told.
Don't get me wrong. I love Beetlejuice as a kid. I watch it again. Do I need the second version of that? No. Would I gladly see a movie about something I haven't thought about before? Yes. And we have to trust that people want to buy into that. And yes, you do need the escapism, but if you want to participate in it and you want to keep making these things happen and you want to make change happen, go to these shows, get pissed off, vote, read, talk to actual people who are not in your echo chamber. Literally. Do the work and make these spaces. And don't just get the gold star because you did the live theater by the marginalized communities. And I think that is what has to be the next step. Like, we have to present these stories and present these conversations and put these people out there. And then the people who are taking it in have to then filter it into their communities.
And fewer and fewer shows need to be directed by people who look like me.
You're gonna put yourself out of business.
I can do other shit.
Just to add on to that, everything is very performative. Absolutely everything. The masses are very performative. To answer your question, Lauren, no. Change does not come about or has not come about, and I can't really remember too much of your question, but I'm trying to, has not come about with theater. I could go to a show and learn something that I've never knew. But it doesn't change much. The times have changed. The way we do things have changed. The way people are getting murdered has changed. Catching brutality of Black bodies has changed. Technology has changed in order for us to be able to see all of that. But if we would have never seen the video of a Black man running down the street and getting shot, we would have never known it happened. It happened months before we saw the video. We would have never known about Breonna Taylor if that wasn't released. That happened months before the video was released. And we keep putting on plays, and we keep making music, and we keep kumbaya, and we keep doing these things that have been done and have been proven to not work. It's been proven to not work. No one can tell me, no one can list anything that we have tried that has worked. If you can, please send it to me. Please do. You know what I mean? I want to know what it is that worked. Maybe I wasn't around. You never know. I don't know. And maybe we need to bring it back. If it worked, maybe that's what the hell we need to do now. But no, theater is a very, very great vessel. It is a very great way to say, this is happening. Let me teach you. Let me show you. It's a very great way to put that on a stage, and there are people who profit off of it because most people like to see other races oppressed. People get off on that. People love to see that for whatever reason. But it doesn't help anything. It doesn't change it. I haven't seen the change. But I'm all for the artist. I'm all for someone who has no other outlet. And all I can do is make music. This is my way. All I can do is dance. This is my way. All I can do is act. This is my way. I'm 100% for that. But will it call it? It'll call attention for about a month. and then we're on to something else. So no, and I'm not going to express what I feel, because I do have a solid way we could make change. I do have a solid fucking way that change could come about, but I'm not going to express that. Just know that I feel as though no, theater has not brought about of storming the Capitol. The reality of Black bodies being like killed and then people getting off on that hasn't theater. I mean, there's so many stories about that in theater, and nothing has changed. So very performative. There are a lot of people who are performative. There are a lot of people who will buy the ticket, get the pin, the sticker, get the little flag, post it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you prefer. And then next month, they on to something else, maybe a TikTok dance or something. I don't know. But yeah, great vessel to put it out there and get heard, be seen, but it hasn't brought about any type of change.
So much of the conversations in the play between characters are about the things that Germana was just saying.
Yeah.
Is about methodology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does revolution look like? Is it possible? If it is possible, who's going to do it, and how is it going to be done, and who's it going to benefit? The quote in the play I love the most is someone says, "We had a revolution, but we don't know how to run it."
Yeah.
We have all these great ideas, but what are we going to do? Mm-hmm. If a play fires you up to do something we're not already doing, fuck you. Why weren't you paying attention before? Why did they take a movie or movies, poems, plays, art, music? It's great. It's there. It can inspire you and stuff. But if the news isn't already pissed you off enough to do something, I can't help you. You are beyond a play helping you.
Agreed. And I also think it speaks to the type of stories we see on stage, because if we don't start, to your point, Jessica, if we don't start seeing some new stories, if we keep seeing Grease and Sister Act and Steel Magnolias, God help me if I see one more production of Steel Magnolias.
The tea is bubbling. The tea is bubbling.
I'm sorry. But I think there are
Lauren, I agree.
I think there are new stories to be told. And my concern is we're seeing some new work now. That's great. I hope we'll still see new voices a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 seasons from now. Right. Let's not just check the boxes and then go back to the way things work.
I think to the point of all this, it's so much has to be the long game. And it's, I can't think of a single person who I've done theater with over the last, it was like 20 years, is how do we get the new audience? How do we get more people involved? How do we get more brown people, Black people, Latino people, LGBTQ plus people? And some of it is some people who have been very cushy in their roles need to give them up. And need to recognize that it's just like you have to I find it very interesting as a person who works in a very collaborative, community-based art form to have so many people hoarding resources, hoarding opportunities, and there's a lot of gatekeeping. And I think there's been a little bit of this kind of opening, wasn't it how many the largest percentage of Black people on Broadway coming up or some nonsense, or the first time you have all these plays written by Black folks,
single-digit number,
still not that high. It's like,
to your fucking horn, why don't you?
And the question that I come away with is, when this stops being super profitable for you as a large theater company, are you still going to invite non-white cisgender people into these spaces? And let's say we want to keep telling the same stories over and over and over again. all right, we'll put somebody who doesn't look straight and white on that stage. And find out what that story then becomes when you have someone who is
Yes.
Asian and have someone who is this, because it's going to be very different. You want to keep regurgitating the same stuff over and over again, put somebody else up on that stage.
And there are
see
some
what
shows
happens.
that maybe we don't need to regurgitate.
And
Maybe
there's-
we can let certain
And
things
there
die.
are plenty of shows that have become the zeitgeist of American theater that can stay
The canon.
the dusty on the
The
shelf,
canon.
and we can look at and say, wow, isn't it great how far we've come?
And this production is not under the auspices of any theater company. We'll be lucky if we break even. And we're okay with that because we love each other and we love this play and we love this story. We want to tell this story to an audience. So we worked really hard to not be able to show it to anybody.
It's true.
But
yeah.
this show is happening because St. John's Metropolitan Community Church, which is a very, I hate this word, progressive church that is very interested in social justice, for Black and brown people and for queer people and for people with disabilities and people who are living in poverty and people who are unhoused. They welcomed us with open arms and said, we see relevance in this story to what our mission is. Literally put this on in our sanctuary. Don't give us any money. We will help you publicize it because we see value in the story. They're not going to make any money off of a show that is this weird, that is this dark, that is this hostile, that is this shocking, that is this in your face. The people who pay money to see this show are going to get their money's worth. That's not up for debate. But there is no company that's ever going to slam hit out of the park money for a season with this on the main stage. I've gone to 3 community theaters before the first production of this with Bear. 3 community theaters turned me down on putting up this show. And every single time the answer was, this just doesn't sell.
Not right now, but who knows? You know, it may be in season sometime. Right now, they're focused on what LGBTQ and Black people. That's the beacon, right? That's the money maker.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll come back around again, and these issues that are in Marat and Sade will be the money maker for them, and then, you know, they'll be calling Dustin like, hey, do you remember when you did Marat and Sade? Yeah. So that's how I see it. In the location of the church, every time I go, it's very funny to see the location of the church, what's right across the street from the church, and what's right next door to it. I'm not going to say nothing. If you guys come and see the show, just pay attention to that.
And those things weren't there when this church was formed.
Yep.
And they stay.
Yep.
The area is starting to get a real nice fresh coat of white paint on it.
Yep.
Tell them.
Maratsad.com, that's where you can go find out more information about the show, buy your tickets, pay what you can. It's running starting next week through August 8th, right, Dustin?
Yeah, July 23rd, which is next Friday, through August 8th. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights at 7. No matinee. This play cannot see the light of day.
Well, I appreciate all of you sharing your insight and sharing your truth. That's why I love doing these interviews. So thank you, Dustin, for joining us. It was going to be the femmes of Marat Sade, but I'm happy.
I talk too much.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm happy. I'm happy you were here. I'm happy to see you. Naveed, pay again, maratsad.com. And I hope everybody goes, supports local artists, supports local theater. There's so much talent in this area, and I'm so glad we're getting back to it. So I can't wait to see you all in a week or so. And I'll wear my mask. I'll do whatever you want. I'm vaccinated. I'll just be there.
And I do want to add, pay what you can includes zero. If you cannot afford to go to the theater, come to our show. Order a ticket, put zero. You have my blessing, my permission, and encouragement to do that. No one should be prohibited from experiencing art because they do not have money. Walk in off the street in the show, and I will put you in a chair.
Well, on that note, thank you. Thank you, Germana. Feel better. Jessica, Riley. I've become huge fans. Germana, I was already a huge fan of yours. So I just, I love you even more now. Dustin, not so much, but Riley and Jessica.
I appreciate you, all that you do for theater around here, Lauren.
Yes, Lauren.
It's much appreciated.
Lauren, I be trying, girl. I'm telling you, when I be seeing those little comments, I be wanting to go. Me and Juan be having conversations, but that's another conversation for another time.
That's another
yes,
show,
girl.
That's another show.
Yes.
But thank you guys for being here, and everyone go see the show. Support local artists. Support local theater. And break legs, guys. Just stay safe and healthy.
We're gonna go practice now.
Go practice. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.